If anyone here has a reason why these two should not be married, I do." He turned. The ring slipped from his fingers, and I walked down the aisle with a folder full of proof and 2 officers behind me. "Hi, I'm Margaret, and I was his wife when he tried to marry someone else in Bali." What happened next? I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I buried 15 years of lies with one walk down the aisle and made sure he'd never forget the moment I stood up and ended everything. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this one. He told me he was going to Singapore for work, just like that. Over toast and marmalade, like he was announcing a dentist appointment. 3 weeks, maybe 4. Southeast Asia's unpredictable, he said, chewing like we were still talking about the weather. "Don't wait up." I blinked. "What's the rush?" "Client emergency," he replied. Last minute, like our marriage didn't warrant more than 12 hours of notice. Like I wasn't supposed to ask questions. But that's the thing about long marriages. You learn which silences are safe and which ones aren't. I swallowed the urge to push, folded my lips into a practiced smile, and said, "All right, I'll make sure your gray pants are dry cleaned." He nodded, kissed my cheek, and left the kitchen without looking back. The suitcase was already open on the bed, not packed, not even close, just dumped there like an afterthought, half-zipped, with a pair of shoes thrown in as if the idea of preparing was too much effort. It always was. I filled in the gaps, like I always did. Socks, underwear. The charger he always forgot. His favorite deodorant, travel-size shampoo, the navy tie I bought him for Christmas 5 years ago. I folded his shirts carefully, pressed out the creases. I tucked a protein bar in the side pocket and slipped in a note. "Don't skip lunch." The kind of note I used to leave when we were newlyweds, before the silences grew teeth. He used to keep those notes in his wallet. Now they probably went straight into the trash, if he even saw them at all. He called me once after landing. Just once. I was folding towels. The house was quiet. His voice was distant, patchy, filtered through static and what sounded like music in the background, something tropical, something live. I asked if everything was okay. He hesitated. "Yeah, just tired, long day." He hung up before I could ask another question. That night, I microwaved leftover lasagna, poured myself a glass of wine, and sat at the table for one. I set it properly, napkin, fork, knife, like I used to when he came home late from work, like pretending everything was fine might eventually make it true. I ate in silence. The house echoed with it. It used to be a comfort. Now it sounded like a warning. I washed the dishes slowly, let the warm water numb my fingers. My mind floated, back to our 10th anniversary when he booked us a cabin in the mountains. He forgot the reservation. We spent the night in a roadside motel with yellow lighting and damp sheets. I told myself it was romantic anyway. The next morning, I woke up early. The sun was bleeding in through the blinds in narrow slats. I reached for my phone like I always did, still half dreaming, hoping for a message. Maybe a photo of the view from his hotel room, a thinking of you. Instead, I saw it. A transaction alert. From our joint card. $322.90. Orchid Villa Boutique Resort. I sat up slowly, rubbed my eyes like that might change what I was seeing. I clicked it open. Orchid Villa. I didn't recognize the name, but something about the words made my chest tighten. I copied and pasted it into Google, and there it was, 5 stars, Bali, all-inclusive, romantic getaway, a photo of a 4-poster bed covered in rose petals, champagne flutes on a balcony, infinity pool, private beach access, a resort built for honeymooners. I stared at the screen, unblinking, my heart beat heavy, not fast but deep, like it was coming from my stomach instead of my chest. I scrolled through the images, a smiling couple lounging in a hammock, sunset massages, candlelight dinners by the ocean. I could taste something bitter rising in my throat. My husband wasn't in Singapore. He wasn't at a client meeting. He He wasn't handling a work emergency. He was barefoot on a beach, drinking champagne with someone else. My fingers hovered over the phone screen, numb. I didn't call him. I didn't text. I just sat there, the buzz of the fridge in the background, and let the silence swallow me whole. I knew. I didn't have proof yet, but I knew. The kind of knowing that wraps itself around your bones, that clings like wet fabric, that whispers in your ear every time you try to lie to yourself. I stood up, poured the rest of the wine into the sink. My hands were shaking, but my face stayed still. I walked to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the half-empty suitcase I had packed for him. I picked up the navy tie, rubbed the silk between my fingers. It felt like grief. The lamp on my nightstand flickered. 15 years. 15 years of being his wife, his shadow, his silent supporter, and he was spending our anniversary wrapped around someone else's waist in a villa I didn't even know existed. I stood up, walked into the closet, and pulled out a box from the top shelf, the one I hadn't touched in years. Inside were our wedding photos, me in lace, him in a tux that didn't quite fit, smiling, young, full of promises neither of us knew we'd break. I pulled one out and stared at it. Then I dropped it face down on the floor. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just stood there, surrounded by evidence of a life that no longer existed, except on paper, on bank statements, in photo albums, in the drawer where I still kept our vows, printed and framed. Something cold pressed against my chest like a flat stone. This wasn't just betrayal. This was annihilation. I didn't cry, not at first. I wish I could say I collapsed, screamed, shattered into 1,000 poetic pieces. But that would have required surprise, shock, and somewhere deep in my gut, that place where instincts never lie, I already knew. So instead, I moved. Not fast, not frantic, just deliberate. Like someone in a dream who knows the house is burning but still takes time to brush their teeth. I made coffee, folded the laundry, wiped the counter down twice even though it wasn't dirty, let the smell of lemon-scented cleaner fill the space like that could scrub away what I was starting to understand. I was married to a man who had planned another wedding while I refilled his prescriptions. A man who told me he loved me with a straight face while probably comparing honeymoon destinations with someone half my age. A man who could lie so seamlessly, so beautifully, that I questioned my own sanity before his honesty. And still, part of me hoped. Maybe it was a work dinner. Maybe he was entertaining clients. Maybe Orchid Villa had a business conference tucked between the oceanfront spa and couples massage packages. I needed to know for sure, so I sat at the kitchen table, the one he insisted we buy, farmhouse style, reclaimed wood, something to impress the neighbors, and pulled his laptop toward me. It was right where he left it, charger dangling off the edge like it always did. I opened the lid. Password screen. I typed in our wedding date. He hadn't changed it. That almost hurt more than if he had. It was lazy, careless. Like he didn't even consider the possibility that I might look. Like I didn't exist enough to be a threat. The desktop loaded, neutral wallpaper, no icons, just a few open tabs across the top. I clicked the first one, Google Docs, document title, Ceremony Draft March. I clicked it, and there it was. My dearest Amira, from the moment I met you, I knew you were my home. My home. I had heard those exact words once, years ago under a blanket fort we made on our third date, drunk on wine and cheap takeout. I thought he meant me. Apparently, it was just part of his script. I read on. I vow to build a life with you full of trust, laughter, and honesty. I stopped. Honesty. The word clanged in my ears like a cruel joke. I scrolled to the bottom, skimming the final lines. There was no mention of his wife, of his life, of the woman who cooked his meals and paid half the mortgage and smiled politely at dinner parties when he told stories that rewrote our shared history. It was like I never happened. I closed the document. swallowed hard, and then opened his photo folder. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I needed the knife to twist. Maybe I needed to bleed a little more to believe it. There were hundreds of photos. Him, her, together, smiling, laughing on a beach, in a boat, at a candle-lit table with rose petals scattered across the tablecloth. She was young, pretty in that effortless social media filtered way, smooth skin, perfect teeth, a laugh that probably sounded like a ringtone, and there was my husband, grinning like a man on his first honeymoon, holding her hand like it was the only hand he'd ever known. Then I saw the ring, zoomed in, recognized it instantly. It was almost identical to mine. Same jeweler, same twisted band with a sapphire tucked beneath the diamond. A detail he once told me made him think of hidden depths. He had recycled our symbol. He had taken what was sacred, what was ours, and handed it to someone else like it was off the clearance shelf. My body went cold. I stared at their faces, still locked in some paradise pose, and I realized something. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a fling. This wasn't even a secret. It was a whole new life. He had buried me. He had stood beside another woman, whispered vows I once dreamed of, and smiled like a man unburdened. I closed the photo, minimized the folder, pushed the laptop away like it might catch fire. Then I sat, very still. The kind of still you get when your nervous system short circuits, when your mind checks out and leaves your body to float through the wreckage alone. I don't know how long I sat there. Could have been 20 minutes, could have been 2 hours. At some point, I looked down and noticed my hands were clenched so tightly the nails had left little half-moon marks in my palms. I opened them slowly, released nothing. Because there was nothing left to hold on to, not trust, not faith, not the fantasy of a man who would come home with chocolates and apologies and say, "It's not what you think." I didn't want an explanation. I wanted strategy. I stood up, walked into the living room, and looked around. Every corner was his. The shoes by the door, the books on the shelf, the smell of his cologne clinging to the armchair. I went into the bedroom, opened the drawer where he kept his passports. 2 of them, one expired, one new. The new one had a recent stamp. Denpasar, Bali. Date, 6 days ago, my wedding anniversary. I smiled, not because it was funny, because it was confirmed. I was no longer suspicious. I was certain, and certainty is power. I didn't cry. I packed a bag, not for leaving, not yet, but because I knew where I was going, straight to the truth, and he'd never see it coming. I didn't go to work the next day. I called in sick, though sick doesn't quite cover what I was feeling. It wasn't a flu or a cold or anything that could be measured with a thermometer. It was a different kind of illness, the kind that poisons your sense of reality, where the ground feels less like ground and more like a trapdoor waiting to open. I sat on the floor of our bedroom, with my back against the wall and a legal pad in my lap. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I made a list. I'm good at lists. Lists make chaos digestible, manageable. If you can itemize your devastation, you can survive it. At the top, I wrote one word in capital letters: evidence. Because I wasn't going to confront him with suspicion. I was going to confront him like a surgeon, precise, prepared, and immune to screams. I started with the receipt from Orchid Villa. I screenshotted the bank alert, printed it, then the photo folder. I printed 10 of them, enough to make a point, enough for the authorities to care. Next, the passport stamp, the date, the airport code, his smiling face in Bali, while I was here, waiting. While I was cooking, folding his shirts, ironing the navy tie. I found their digital wedding invite in his email drafts, just sitting there like a rotten peach. Amira and Tom, March 18th, Bali, a celebration of love, fate, and new beginnings. I printed that too. New beginnings. As if our life was some long-winded prequel. I highlighted the venue. White Sands Chapel, Bali, a boutique location famous for beachfront ceremonies. Then I called my lawyer. Yes, I already had one. No, he didn't know why I was calling yet. We hadn't spoken since we drafted our wills 5 years ago, back when I still believed forever had weight. When I told him what was happening, he fell silent. That's potentially criminal, he said finally. Bigamy? Fraud? You have proof? I will, I said. By the time they say I do, I'll have enough to blow the whole illusion apart. He offered to meet immediately. I declined. I had other things to do first. Next call, my cousin Lila. She worked in immigration law, knew the ropes, knew people who knew people. I told her what I found. She didn't ask if it was real. She just said, "Send me everything. I'll pull some strings. And Margaret, don't wait. Nail him to the wall." And then, the most delicate call of all, the embassy. I told them I suspected a U.S. citizen was committing bigamy on foreign soil. I explained I had documentation, photos, witnesses. They asked me if I had an active marriage certificate with this man. I pulled it out of the filing cabinet, held it like a shield. My name, his name, dated, signed, notarized. 15 years ago. Yes, I said. And I'd like to know what the hell happens when your legal husband marries someone else on a beach in front of 24 guests and a destination photographer. There was a pause. Then the voice on the line said, "We'll be in touch." I hung up. The wheels were in motion. I wasn't shaking anymore. I was focused. The rage had cooled into something sharper, a blade honed over every late dinner, every brushed-off question, every night I stayed up alone while he played the part of a doting fiancé somewhere far more picturesque. He thought I'd stay quiet. He counted on it. I dug deeper, found Venmo payments to a Bali events company, flowers, music, a luxury dinner package for 20. Found a message he sent someone named Jared that read, "Don't worry, I've got it covered." She has no idea. Just keep your mouth shut. She, me. I printed it all. I booked a flight. Not the same airline as his, no. I wasn't about to play detective in first class. I chose a red-eye with a layover. I didn't care how long it took. What mattered was getting there on the right day. The right moment. I packed carefully. No Black Ops mission gear. Just a sleek, fitted black dress. The kind you wear to funerals. Or justice. I packed heels, a slim folder of documents, my passport, and a copy of our marriage license, freshly notarized with an embossed seal. I stood in front of the mirror the night before I left, looked at myself. Gray strands visible at the temples, lines around my eyes. I didn't bother covering them. I wanted to look like myself, the real me, the woman he betrayed, not some made-up version molded for optics. I practiced what I'd say, but then realized I wouldn't need to say anything. Let the silence speak. Let the proof do the talking. Let the police behind me carry the final word. I didn't call him before I left, didn't send a single text. Let him think I was home, folding towels, feeding the cat, scrolling through Netflix. Let him believe I was invisible. Let him marry her with that delusion still intact. Because when I walked into that chapel, when I crossed the threshold in my black dress with my folder and my fax and my fire, it wouldn't just be the end of his second wedding. It would be the beginning of his reckoning. And he had no idea what was coming. It was hot the day I landed. Bali has a kind of heat that isn't just about temperature. It's the kind that clings to your skin like shame, seeps through your clothes, makes you feel like the air itself is watching. I stepped off the plane, alone, dressed in black. No suitcase, just a carry-on, a folder, and a silence I'd worn like armor for weeks. The cab driver tried to make small talk. "Vacation?" he asked. "Something like that," I said. He asked if I was meeting anyone. I looked out the window past the mopeds and palm trees and souvenir shops. "No," I said. "I'm meeting a ghost." The resort was exactly as I expected. White walls, flower petals in the fountains, smiling staff in matching uniforms. The kind of place where people take slow-motion videos of their champagne flutes and caption them with cliches like, "Forever starts here." Forever. My ass. I didn't check in. I waited across the street in a shaded cafe, drinking bitter coffee and watching the guests arrive. I recognized a few from our past. One of his old college friends, a coworker he used to lie about working late with, even his cousin, the one who sent us a blender as a wedding gift 15 years ago. They all walked in, smiling, clueless. I waited until they were all inside, until the chairs were filled, until the string quartet had begun playing some soft, meaningless song, until she, the bride, had walked down the aisle barefoot, her veil trailing behind her like she thought she was floating. Then I stood, smoothed my dress, picked up my folder, and walked straight toward the chapel. The guards at the gate hesitated, probably assuming I was some late relative. One of them opened the gate for me, smiling politely. "Are you with the bride or groom?" "Neither," I said. "I'm the first wife." His smile faltered. I kept walking. My heels clicked against the stone path like punctuation, like a drumbeat building. I could hear the officiant's voice drifting through the open windows. "And if anyone here has reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony," right on cue. I opened the door. All heads turned, every single one, and there he was, Tom, standing at the altar in a linen suit, sweat at his hairline, holding her hands like she was his lighthouse and he was the lost sailor. And then he saw me. His face didn't fall. It collapsed, like a structure that had been built too fast, too carelessly, without a foundation. I walked slowly, deliberately. The room went silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. I walked past rows of guests, some turning, whispering, trying to figure out if this was part of the show. Maybe a dramatic surprise speech, maybe a long-lost sister. He opened his mouth. I raised my hand. "No," I said, just one word. Number I turned to the officiant. "Are you legally ordained in this country?" He blinked. Yes, I am." I handed him the folder. "Then you should know this marriage is invalid." He took it, opened it. His eyes widened. Inside was everything. Our marriage license, photocopies of our passports, the Bali wedding invite, the dated receipts, the printed emails, the notarized statement from my attorney, a signed affidavit confirming we were never divorced. Behind me, 2 uniformed officers stepped forward. Local police. Courtesy of the embassy. Gasps broke the silence. Her Amira. She turned toward him slowly, like her neck couldn't quite bear the weight of this new truth. "You said," she started, voice small. He looked like a man drowning in cement. I didn't give him the chance to explain. I didn't come here for closure. I came here for truth, for justice. For every night I stayed up waiting. For every lie I swallowed like medicine. For every time I gaslit myself into believing I was loved. I stepped aside. "Take your time," I told her. "He's had practice." She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She did something better. She stepped away from him, like something unclean had brushed her shoulder. And then she walked, out of the chapel, past me. She didn't look at me, didn't nod, didn't thank me. She just left, which was fine. She didn't owe me anything. She wasn't the villain. He was. And now everyone knew it. He looked at me like he didn't recognize me. Like the woman in front of him wasn't the same one who spent a decade and a half building his life from the ground up. Maybe I wasn't. Maybe that woman died the moment he said, "I love you" to someone else with my ring. The officers moved forward. I didn't stay to watch. I turned and walked out. The sun was high now, harsh, white hot. I welcomed it. Burn me clean, I thought. Burn every last illusion off my skin. I kept walking, past the staff who avoided my gaze, past the photographer who stood frozen with his camera raised but forgotten, past the cabana where they'd planned to take couples' photos, let them take pictures of that, let them remember the day the backdrop collapsed. I walked until the music faded, until the voices disappeared behind glass. And then I laughed. Software sharp, like glass breaking in my throat. It felt like breathing for the first time. I didn't go back to the hotel right away. I walked for hours, through alleys buzzing with scooters, past beach bars pumping music, past honeymooners clinging to each other like the world had just started. No one knew me here. No one looked twice. It was almost a relief to be invisible by choice, instead of being made invisible by the man I married. At some point, I found a quiet bench near the shore. I kicked off my heels, let my toes sink into the sand, and watched the waves roll in. The sky was starting to bruise, blue fading into lavender, lavender bleeding into dusk. I felt hollow, not broken, not yet, just scraped clean. Like everything inside had been poured out, and I was waiting to see what, if anything, would fill it back up. My phone buzzed. 1 call, then 2, then 7, all from him. I turned it off, let him scream into the void. He hadn't said a word when I walked out of that chapel, hadn't chased me, hadn't called out. He just stood there, watching the walls of his new life collapse around him, rubble built from every lie he swore I'd never catch. By the time I made it back to my hotel, it was close to midnight. There were emails waiting, texts, one from his sister. What the hell happened? He's saying you ambushed him. Is it true? Ambushed. Funny how truth feels like an ambush to people who live in fiction. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my bag, pulled out the envelope I'd kept folded between the documents, a letter I wrote on the plane, just in case I needed to remind myself why I'd come. Margaret, if you're reading this, he's standing at an altar with someone who isn't you. You found the receipts, the photos, the truth. You came all this way because you knew that staying silent would kill you slowly and exposing him would set something inside you free. You're not crazy. You're not petty. You're a woman who saw the truth and refused to look away. You have done what most people don't dare. You didn't wait for permission to matter. You showed up in the flesh and reminded him and everyone else that you exist, that you were never optional. I read it once, then tore it in half. I didn't need reminders anymore. I knew who I was, and it wasn't his wife, not anymore. The next morning, I called my lawyer again, told him everything that happened, sent photos, copies of police statements, statements from witnesses who'd seen both weddings, ours and his attempt at a second. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "We'll begin proceedings immediately. This will go in your favor." I almost laughed. Favor. As if there was any favor in discovering you've been erased. Still, I nodded. "Make it clean," I said, and loud. He understood what I meant. Bigamy isn't just betrayal. It's a legal offense. And I wasn't going to whisper through this. I drafted an email to his employer, attached proof, kept it factual, emotionless, polite, just letting you know that your senior executive was in Bali this weekend committing a felony. Send. Then I posted one photo on Facebook. It wasn't of me or of him. It was of our marriage certificate, folded neatly on the chapel floor. No caption, no hashtags, just a digital receipt of the life he tried to pretend never existed. The reactions were immediate. Hundreds of likes, comments, messages, some confused, some horrified, but most were supportive. I always knew something was off about him. "You're a hero. Thank you for showing us we don't have to stay quiet." And still, not a word from him that meant anything. Not an apology, just more missed calls, a few texts that read like damage control. "You made a scene. It didn't have to be like this. You ruined everything." Number he did. He ruined everything when he chose to lie, when he chose to look at someone else the way he hadn't looked at me in years, and then tried to make her the new chapter without ever closing the book on me. I turned off my phone again, permanently this time. If he wanted to talk, he could talk to my lawyer. I went downstairs and sat by the pool, ordered a drink I couldn't pronounce. let the sun hit my face. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel small. I felt infinite. Because no matter what came next, the divorce, the fallout, the stares, I had done the one thing he never thought I would. I had stopped waiting to be loved and started acting like I deserved better. He didn't stop calling. Even after I shut off my phone, even after I blocked his number, the messages kept finding their way. Through emails, through mutual friends, through social media accounts I hadn't touched in years. First, there was panic. Then came denial. Then blame, the trifecta of guilt and cowardly men. You're overreacting. It wasn't a real wedding. You've humiliated me. I read those lines like they were written in another language. Cold, brittle words from a man who couldn't grasp the gravity of his own actions. It wasn't just a betrayal of marriage. It was a betrayal of memory, of time, of sacrifice, of every small kindness I gave without a receipt. I had been with him through everything, the layoff, the herniated disc, the birthday he forgot his own mother's name after too many drinks, the night his father died and he sobbed so hard I thought his lungs would collapse. I held him through all of it, and when I needed holding, I got a spreadsheet of expenses and a "we're both just really busy, Margaret." Now here he was, exposed, undone, desperate, not because he felt remorse, but because the mask had slipped and the cameras were still on. I knew the difference. Remorse is private. Real. This was damage control. He emailed me 3 days after the wedding. That wasn't. The subject line said, "Closure." The body was a monologue of excuses. I didn't mean to hurt you. It wasn't serious. I was going to tell you. I thought you didn't love me anymore. I felt invisible. That last line made me pause. Invisible. The man who erased me from his new life, who photoshopped me out of his future like I was a stain on a white dress, now wanted to play the victim. I didn't reply, but I opened a blank document and typed, "Do you know what it's like to feel invisible?" It's packing his suitcase with clean socks while he texts her under the table. It's remembering every food allergy, every dentist appointment, every flight number while he forgets your birthday. It's smiling through another holiday with his family while they praise his promotion and call you lucky to have him. It's hosting your own anniversary dinner and clearing the plates alone while he checks the stock market on his phone. It's saying, "I love you," and hearing thanks in return. That's invisibility. I didn't send it. I just read it, out loud, once. And then I closed the tab. He didn't deserve my words anymore. The divorce began in earnest. My lawyer moved like a surgeon, swift, precise. No wasted motion. He filed under grounds of adultery and bigamy, attached every piece of evidence I'd collected, and requested full financial transparency. Tom stalled, of course, claimed he needed time, claimed the documents were in storage, as if the truth lived in a basement box and not in every lie he told with his eyes open. I wasn't surprised. Cowards run out of charm when faced with consequence. But I had time, and power, and silence. And God, silence can be a cathedral when you stop using it as a jail. He tried one last time. Showed up at my sister's house unannounced. I wasn't there. She told him to leave. He said he just wanted to talk. She said, "You had 15 years to talk." Now she's listening to herself, and she shut the door. The next week, a package arrived. No return address. Inside, my old wedding ring, a yellowing photo from our honeymoon, and a note with 6 words. "Please don't erase everything we had." I stared at the photo. We were sitting on a boat, wind in our hair, drinks in hand. I looked happy. He looked smug. I placed the ring and the photo in a box labeled "Past." Put it in the back of my closet, not out of sentiment, out of ceremony. Closure isn't about forgetting. It's about deciding what no longer gets front row access to your heart. A few nights later, I invited some friends over. Real friends. The kind who don't flinch when you say, "He married someone else," and instead respond with, "Okay, where do we hide the body?" We cooked dinner together, laughed too hard, shared old stories, poured wine like we were baptizing ourselves in freedom. At one point, my friend Nina raised her glass and said, "To Margaret, for crashing the party," and lighting the match. We all laughed. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't still hurting, but because I was healing louder, because every laugh, every story, every moment that wasn't about him was proof I was crawling back to myself, because the woman who packed his suitcase and stayed up late waiting for keys to turn in locks was gone. And in her place, a woman who shows up to weddings with receipts, who doesn't whisper her pain, who doesn't wait to be invited in. I toasted back. To the ones who get back up, I said, and to the ones who learn that the fire doesn't always mean ruin. Sometimes it means rebirth. Glasses clinked, and just like that, the evening folded around me like a warm coat, snug, familiar, safe. It wasn't the life I imagined, but it was finally mine. There's a strange stillness that comes after you burn your life down, not regret, not even peace, just space, wide, echoing space where chaos used to live, where your heartbeat finally finds a rhythm that isn't survival. That's where I found myself in the weeks that followed. The phone stopped ringing, the texts slowed, then vanished. Even the social media noise dulled to a hush, like people had moved on, found new gossip to chew on. Eventually, even public betrayal becomes yesterday's headline. But for me, it wasn't over. Not because I still loved him, because I was still unlearning the version of myself that needed him. I cleaned the house top to bottom, not the kind of cleaning you do when guests are coming, the kind you do when you're trying to exorcise something. I tossed out the slippers he used to wear, the chipped mug he loved, the throw blanket we bought during a trip to Vermont where we barely spoke but pretended we were still in love for the benefit of strangers. Gone. Donated, dumped, deleted. I took the wedding photo off the wall, the one where we stood under a pergola, smiling like fools, his hand on my waist, my eyes squinting from the sun, from the lie. I didn't rip it, didn't burn it. I slid it into a box labeled "Truths I Don't Need to See Daily," because I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake. Some nights the memories still snuck in, not the dramatic ones, not the wedding crash, not the emails, not even the moment I saw him in that chapel holding another woman's hands. The ones that haunted me were small. Him handing me a cup of tea with too much sugar because he always forgot how I liked it. The way he used to rest his hand on my thigh while driving, like second nature. Him leaning over to tie my shoe once when I was 9 months pregnant and couldn't reach. Those were the memories that made me ache, because they reminded me that at some point he was trying, that at some point there had been love, or at least something close enough to pass, and I had held on to that version of him long after he'd let go. That's what betrayal really is. It's not the moment they leave. It's the thousands of silent steps they take away from you while you're still looking in their direction, still cooking their meals, still folding their shirts. I went back to therapy, not because I was falling apart, but because I wanted to rebuild with intention this time. No more autopilot, no more waiting for someone else to define my worth. I don't know who I am without being his wife, I said in the first session. The therapist nodded, didn't flinch. She said, "Then let's find out." I bought new bed sheets. White, clean, no memory in the fabric. I rearranged the furniture, turned our old bedroom into something that didn't hum with his ghost every time I turned the light off. I took up gardening again, something I loved before him. Before life turned into damage control, I planted marigolds, thyme, sweet basil, things that smell good when you brush past them, things that grow in imperfect soil. One morning I sat on the porch with a cup of black coffee, no sugar, and watched a butterfly land on the railing. I know it sounds cliché, but I swear to you it stayed longer than it should have. Long enough for me to think, I'm not waiting anymore. Not for apologies. Not for closure. Not for someone to explain why they thought I was disposable. I wasn't disposable. I was convenient. And then I became inconvenient. And that scared him more than anything else ever could. The divorce finalized faster than anyone expected. His lawyer sent a polite, desperate message. He wanted a quiet settlement. No public court. No media. I agreed. But not because I cared about his reputation. Because I didn't want my name tethered to his longer than necessary. My lawyer called me the day the papers were signed. It's done, he said. You're free. I nodded. Free. It didn't hit all at once. There was no confetti, no champagne, just a deep breath, and the realization that I had been breathing shallow for years. I made one final visit. To a storage unit he forgot I still had access to. I boxed up the last of his things. Old books, college trophies, a pair of cufflinks I gave him when he got promoted and never wore. I left them in a neat pile, labeled the box, Return to Sender. And then I walked out, turned the key in, locked the door. It didn't feel like closure. It felt like a doorway, like the beginning of something quieter, steadier, truer. That night I lit a candle in my new living room, a scent I picked, a flame I lit. I turned on music, not his playlists, not background noise, but something that made me want to move. And I danced, alone, no choreography. No witness, no apology, just me. Spinning barefoot on a floor he never walked on, in a life he doesn't own, not anymore. I didn't tell anyone I was planning the dinner, not at first. It wasn't for the spectacle. It wasn't about revenge. This wasn't a redemption tour. It was something smaller, quieter, more sacred. A declaration, not of war, but of self. I was going to host a dinner in my home, with my food at my table, not his, not ours, mine. No folding chairs, no assigned seating, no second-rate place cards behind swinging doors. I was taking back the head of my own damn table. The guest list was short, not blood, not obligation, but people who had shown up. Nina, who dropped off soup the week the news broke and didn't ask questions, just said, "If you want to scream, I brought a pillow for that too." Mr. Eldridge from next door, who brought in my trash bins for months and left little notes in my mailbox that said things like, "You don't owe the world a smile." Lila, my cousin, who stayed on the phone with me for 3 hours the night I found the wedding photos and just kept repeating, "You're not crazy, you're not crazy, you're not crazy." A few others, 6 total. Enough to fill the house with sound, with warmth, with proof that I was still lovable, even when I wasn't making coffee for a man who lied for sport. I cleaned every inch of the place, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. There's a kind of tenderness in scrubbing your baseboards when it's not for appearances, but for peace. I picked out a new tablecloth, sunflower yellow with blue borders, something that felt like a Sunday morning before guilt had a seat. I bought real napkins, cloth, not paper, folded them like the old days, but this time not to impress, just because I could. The menu? Whatever the hell I felt like cooking. Lemon garlic chicken, roasted vegetables with cracked pepper and thyme, a citrus salad so bright it made the whole room smell like summer. I made dessert too, not his favorite, mine. Pistachio cake with rosewater glaze, something delicate, decadent, entirely unshared. As the house filled with scent, garlic, lemon zest, warm butter, I opened the windows. Let the breeze in, let the past out. Music played low. Van Morrison, Stevie Nicks, a little Etta James. Not our songs, mine. The first knock came just after 6. It was Nina, holding a bottle of red and wearing a grin that could melt metal. "You look like someone who just buried something and planted flowers over the grave," she said. "I did," I said. "Now come in." The rest followed. Hugs that lingered. Laughter that didn't need prompting. No one asked about him. No one even said his name. It was glorious. We poured drinks, passed plates, ate slowly, talked loudly, laughed until someone almost choked on a roasted carrot. At one point, someone started talking about worst first dates. Another admitted she once ghosted a man mid-movie because he kept quoting the dialogue out loud. And there I was, in the middle of it, laughing, like I hadn't just burned a 15-year illusion to the ground, like I hadn't spent the last month finding pieces of myself in places I'd forgotten to look. I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror, and I liked what I saw. Gray at the temples, lines at the corners of my mouth, not a stitch of mascara, just me, unpolished, unapologetic, unmistakably alive. Dinner ended, but no one left. We moved to the porch. Someone lit a candle. Someone else passed around a second bottle of wine. Mr. Eldridge brought out a harmonica and played exactly 1.5 songs before being kindly begged to stop. And then, out of nowhere, Nina raised her glass. "To Margaret," she said, "for taking back what was always hers." Everyone clinked glasses, and for the first time in my adult life, I stood to speak without trembling. I looked at every face around me, not one bound by blood, not one earned through sacrifice, but chosen, intentionally, authentically. I said, to the women who gave everything and were still told they were too much. To the ones who got left behind and decided they'd rather walk alone than be dragged. To the ones who learned that love without respect is just a prettier form of prison. To the ones who stopped waiting to be invited in and built their own damn house. Glasses clinked again, and I sat back down, not on the edge, not in the shadows, not beside the trash bin near the kitchen, but at the center. Exactly where I belonged. Later that night, after everyone had left, I did the dishes in silence. But it wasn't the lonely kind. It was the silence of wholeness, of return, of something steady and sacred humming beneath my skin that hadn't been there in years. The kitchen was warm, still smelling of cake and rosemary. I wiped the last plate dry, blew out the candles, and stood in the quiet for a while, not waiting, not wishing, just existing, fully, finally, on my own terms. The next morning, the doorbell rang, not loudly, not urgently, just steady, like he knew I was home, like he wasn't going to leave until I answered. I stood in the hallway barefoot, one hand wrapped around a mug of coffee, watching his silhouette through the frosted glass. It had been weeks since the wedding, weeks of silence from me, weeks of unraveling, I imagine, for him. I opened the door slowly. There he was, Tom, same man, different eyes. The suit was gone. So was the swagger. He wore a wrinkled t-shirt, dark circles under his eyes. His mouth tightened like he'd rehearsed 10 different ways to start this conversation and forgot them all at once. "Hi, Margaret," he said. I didn't say it back. I stepped aside. Let him in. He hesitated. Walked past me. The house was clean. Still. The scent of lemon oil in the air. My garden through the window in full bloom, marigolds, basil, honeysuckle. On the mantel, the photos were gone, every last one of him, of us. He noticed. His eyes flicked to the empty frames, the small gaps where memories used to live. He turned to speak, but I cut him off. "Sit." He did. The same armchair he used to sink into while I cooked dinner, told stories he half listened to, gave smiles that didn't reach his eyes. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, he sighed, rubbing his face like he could scrub the guilt out of his skin. "I didn't come here to fight," he said. "Good," I replied, voice flat. "Because I don't argue with ghosts." He flinched, but didn't deny it. I don't understand what happened," he said. "One minute everything was fine, and then—" "Fine?" I echoed. He looked confused. Truly confused, like he believed it. "1 minute, everything was fine," he repeated. I stared at him. "You had a second wedding, Tom." He looked down. "You told her I didn't exist." He opened his mouth. You stole 15 years, and when it got inconvenient, you replaced me like expired milk. I leaned forward. You don't get to say everything was fine. He swallowed hard. Emily said, he started. Of course, her. Always someone else to hand the script to. Always someone else to play co-writer in the story of his cowardice. She said it would be better for the pictures, he continued. For the look. She? I said. Or you? He didn't answer. Didn't need to. I stood up, walked to the closet, pulled out a box, set it on the table between us. What's this? He asked. Receipts. He blinked. Every one of them, I said. From the last 12 months. The venue, the dress, the photographer, the flowers, the second-tier band you weren't sure we needed, the hotel upgrade for her parents, all of it. He reached for the papers. Didn't touch them. Then I pulled out the final item, the one thing heavier than all the rest, the marriage certificate. Ours. Still valid. Still binding. I didn't speak while he stared at it. Didn't interrupt while the blood drained from his face. Didn't soften when his hand trembled slightly. He started, but there was nothing to follow it. You let me believe we were fine while you planned a new life. I didn't think you'd find out, he whispered. And there it was, not regret, not sorrow, just exposure. I stepped back. You thought I was too quiet, I said. Too safe, too tired to look. He nodded slightly, like he thought it would earn him points for honesty. But I looked, I said, and then I acted. He nodded again, not knowing that every movement, every breath he took in that room was being watched by someone who no longer needed a single thing from him. I just wanted something different, he mumbled, and for the first time I laughed, not out of humor, out of disbelief. You had different, I said. You had love without effort. You had loyalty without earning it. You had comfort without consequence. I picked up the box, closed the lid. These are yours now, I said, handing it to him. He hesitated, took it, held it like it might bite. You always said I was your whole world, he said softly. You were, I replied. And then I added the part I'd never said before. And now I'm finally mine. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. He wasn't. He was just seeing me for the first time, without him in the picture. I walked him to the door, opened it, let the sunlight pour in, washing over the shadows of a man who had never quite learned how to stand in it. He paused on the threshold, still holding the box. Do you hate me? He asked. I considered it. No, I said. I'm just done remembering who you pretended to be. Then I closed the door, turned the lock, and stood in the silence that followed, not grieving, not gloating, just free. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was haunted, but because I wasn't. No looping memories, no imagined arguments, no daydreams of what I could have said better, should have said louder, just stillness. That's how I knew it was over. Grief doesn't always end in a scream. Sometimes it ends in a whisper, and sometimes it ends in nothing at all. I woke up with sunlight on my face, no alarm, no to-do list dictated by someone else's absence. I made coffee, sat on the porch, let the mug warm my palms, let the birds do the talking, let the wind braid itself into my hair. I wasn't thinking about revenge anymore. I was thinking about paint colors for the guest room, about maybe adopting a dog, about traveling. Not to escape, but to arrive. There's a difference. I wasn't running anymore. Later that day, I opened a new journal. Fresh pages. No history. On the first line, I wrote, "What does Margaret want?" Not "what should I do?" Not "what's next?" Just want. It took me a long time to answer. Because I had spent so many years building around other people's needs, I forgot what my own sounded like. But slowly, quietly, the answers started to come. I want to take a pottery class. I want to cook meals no one else critiques. I want to stop apologizing before I speak. I want to spend a Sunday in bed with books and no guilt. I want to write something that has my name on it. I want a life that doesn't require proof of worthiness. I want peace that doesn't arrive like a reward, but like a right. That afternoon, I donated the last of our shared belongings, the Christmas stockings, the board games we never opened, the wine glasses engraved with our initials, now just letters with no meaning. I watched the donation truck drive off, trailing dust behind it. Didn't flinch, didn't cry, because you can't mourn things that never held you. 2 weeks later, I bought a plane ticket, not to Bali, not to erase anything. To begin, Lisbon, one way. I'd always wanted to see the tiled streets, the bookstores, the ocean crashing against cobblestones. He never had time, never had interest, always too busy. Now I had time, and I had interest, and I had no one telling me it was impractical or excessive or a bad season to travel. I booked it, packed a small suitcase, left a note with my neighbor, fed the marigolds one last time, then I walked out the door and didn't look back. Lisbon was kind to me. Strangers smiled. My feet found rhythm in foreign streets. I ordered pastries with broken Portuguese and didn't care when I got it wrong. I sat in bookstores for hours, flipping pages I couldn't read. I wrote postcards I never mailed. I walked the waterfront at dusk and didn't wish anyone was walking beside me, because I wasn't alone. I was with myself, and for the first time in my adult life, that felt like enough. More than enough. Whole. One night, I found a small cafe off a cobbled side street. No menu, just whatever the chef made that day. I sat at a corner table with a glass of wine and my journal, and I wrote, "He doesn't live in me anymore." Not a metaphor, not a mantra, just truth. And I believed it. Sometimes people ask me how I survived, how I found the courage to walk into that wedding, how I stayed calm, stayed elegant, stayed me. And the answer is simple. I didn't walk into his wedding to ruin his life. I walked in to reclaim mine, to end the performance, to look a lie in the face and say no more. And when it was over, when the doors closed and the silence came, I didn't chase a new story. I wrote my own, page by page, not a redemption arc, not a look how strong I am fairy tale, just the honest, unfiltered record of a woman who was invisible and became seen by herself first, and then by the world. If you've ever been erased, if you've ever been told you were too much or not enough, if you've ever been traded in for something newer, quieter, shinier, listen to me now. You are not disposable. You are not replaceable. You are not the supporting character in someone else's delusion. You are the whole damn plot, the twist, the reckoning. And when you finally decide to stop asking for permission, you'll find a life waiting on the other side of that silence, one that doesn't beg for scraps. It celebrates your hunger, your fire, your name. So speak it, loud, clear, and only for yourself.